Now, one person we did hear from today for the first time, Karen Reed herself, doubling down, of course, saying she did not do this. She wants to know who did.
Said it feels we're the only ones fighting for the truth of what happened to John O'Keefe. And me and my family and my attorneys and my team have marshaled every resource to get to the truth. It just feels like no one else wants it.
Karen, just to be clear, you didn't do it.
We know who did it, Steve. We know. And we know who spearheaded this cover-up. You all know.
Yes, we do.
And no, she didn't do it. No, she didn't do it. This is an innocent woman. She didn't do it.
I tried to save his life.
Yeah.
I tried to save his life at 6 in the morning. I was covered in the only one trying to save his life.
Why'd you admit to it?
She didn't admit to it. She didn't admit to anything close to that. Nothing close to that. And you should know that.
That was like 3 or 4 times she admitted to it.
No, she didn't.
That's not true.
She asked a question. She asked a question, which is very different. She didn't admit to anything.
You are listening to the Roberta Glass True Crime Report, putting the true back in true crime. From New York City, Roberta Glass is now on the record.
Okay. How is everybody? Thank you for your patience. Boy, I'm having a day. I had a car alarm go off outside my building for about 3 hours. I had to call 911. Do you know that's the proper procedure when a car outside your apartment building is going off, a car alarm is going off? You have to call 911. And then it went on. It was 3 hours of nonstop craziness. And then, I'm getting ready for the show, and lo and behold, as I'm downloading the video of Dr. Marie Russell, which is the subject of today's episode, her testimony in the hearing yesterday, the defense wants to use her as a dog bite expert. The Commonwealth says no way is she qualified to be a expert in bite and hold of dog bites, dog bite expert, whatever you want to call her. No way is she qualified. That came through very clearly to me and most of my audience. However, we do come at this case with a point of view. Most of us watched the first trial. So we are not, and we're not a judge, and we are not, I don't know who's an expert on Massachusetts law, but I thought that the closing argument, for lack of a better word, by Hank Brennan for the Commonwealth yesterday was very persuasive. He went into, you can see, and I broke down a little bit of the areas of his questioning in this video. Talks about methodology. What methodology did you use to determine that the wounds on John O'Keefe came from a dog? And she's like, well, I know because I've seen it. Well, how did you recognize? Well, it's pattern recognition. Well, how? And then he actually brought out a picture of John O'Keefe's arm and went through, well, which teeth are these? Are these, you said in the last hearing that these might be paw marks, or in the trial? Can't remember. So she was, by the end of it, then he went into, are you familiar with the evidence? We know that a couple new pieces of business before I get into the video. We know that the defense has rejected, are not going to use the molds. They had to put this poor dog to sleep, not to sleep, but under anesthesia, excuse me. Under anesthesia. I said to sleep, but that's what I meant, under anesthesia. But has another meaning, unfortunately. They put the dog under anesthesia to get these impressions. And now the defense doesn't want to use these impressions. Does that mean they're not going to use Dr. Russell? Does that mean that the dog portion of their defense is out? I don't know. Because if I had a very strong sense that Dr. Russell, if she comes in at all, will come in a very limited scope. But if I had to bet after yesterday's hearing, I would think that she wouldn't come in. I mean, she says, according to her, and Hank Brennan really played on her narcissism. That's something I saw in the first half of his cross-examination of Marie Russell, really honed in on her narcissism and played to it. There were several times in court yesterday where he forgot to call her doctor, then apologized just to kind of rile her up. He also talked about different experts in dog bites. This is another point important to mention. The federal expert who looked at John O'Keefe's arm wounds ruled out a dog. Do you know that? No. But Marie Russell feels that no one is as qualified as she is because she's seen, quote, I had to go back and listen to it again, hundreds of thousands of dog bites. Now it's in the hundreds of thousands. So I don't know. I guess you could say maybe that's from a book, but I would have followed up. Where have you seen hundreds of thousands of dog bites in your time? As someone who was bit by a dog, I don't run into very many people who have been bit by a dog. It's kind of a common thing. My boyfriend says she must have been looking at dog bites 24 hours a day. It's her interest. She has the specialty and interest, but she's never read the book on dog bites, strangely. I mean, my area of interest is innocence fraud. I've read everything I can get my hands on, including books, anything that vaguely, and the other side, and the books by the other side of this issue. So I just can't imagine just being satisfied with a few articles. But okay, here's Dr. Marie Russell. Here's her testimony, edited. It was 7 hours yesterday, so I edited it down a bit. Take a listen.
Speak, Your Honor.
Yes.
Dr. Russell, I'm handing you two documents. You have a third. The one before you is a transcript of the last hearing called the Lanigan hearing that you attended. This is a copy of your voir dire testimony. I've noted it on the top right for you, and also trial testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you. May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
I had asked you if you had expressed any uncertainty in the past about your opinion as it relates to the opinion you gave at the Lanigan hearing, at the last hearing, whether your position has changed or evolved is what I'm getting at. And you said that your position has not changed. Is that right?
That's correct.
You were asked at the trial about the injuries and how you think they happened. I want you to turn to the trial transcript. If you'd turn to page 19, line 21. Do you recall at the trial you were asked about the injuries, and you said, I believe that these injuries were sustained by an animal, possibly a large dog, because of the pattern of injuries? Do you remember saying that?
That's not here in front of me.
But I'm asking you, do you remember saying that at the trial, that you believe the injuries were sustained by an animal, possibly a large dog?
Something to that effect, yes.
Okay. And when you said that, you used the word possible because you weren't certain, were you?
Can you show me where that is?
Well, I'm asking a question, not asking about the transcript. The reason why when you were asked and you said it was by an animal, possibly a large dog, is because you were uncertain.
You know, Mr. Brennan, I think I explained that before, that In medicine, there are no absolutes. And that's what, physicians are ingrained to think, is there are no absolutes in it that way. But
She comes off like a child, the way a child lies. I just meant no absolutes. She's been winging this since day one. Judge Canone was not impressed with her first time around. I don't think she was any more impressed felt like Alessi was putting words in her mouth, was asking questions like, is it a big dog? Or I'm just making up, this wasn't a real question he asked, but just pick out the tone. This is just for tone. Was it a big dog or a little dog? Oh, it was a big dog. It was like we heard Alessi testifying yesterday. But she has this habit. Oh, I just meant there was no absolutes. And then she said in this hearing that she's not a woman who just came off of the street. She's literally a woman who came off of the street, read a newspaper article, inserted herself from her years of medical training. First she was a cop, then she was an EMT, she worked in the coroner's offices, ended up as a jail doctor for all men inmates, where she saw tons of dog bites from police dog injuries. Originally, her expertise was bite and hold, and now it's just general dog bites. And in her presentation, she said there was tons of times when because of language differences, which I think that was Alessi putting that little flair in there, or other reasons. I don't know what other reasons. Nobody could find a translator in the hospital. She had to figure out, someone couldn't tell her it was a dog, and she had to figure it out herself. But she can't say how she did it. So methodology is going to be a thing that Hank Brennan hammers home again and again with Dr. Russell. How do you tell? How do you determine? What is your methodology? You talk about pattern recognition. Where's your pattern recognition? And she had no methodology. And that must be a legal requirement for an expert. Is she counting teeth? But she couldn't tell which teeth it were. It wasn't, John O'Keefe's arm was moving around. The whole thing was absurd.
I was certain that it was a dog.
Yet you were testifying as an expert witness, weren't you?
Yes, I understand that, but I was thinking like a doctor.
I see. And you understood as an expert witness that you were asking the jury to rely on your opinion. You were trying to be as accurate as possible, weren't you?
Yes, I usually do, yes.
You were trying to be precise in your testimony under oath, weren't you?
Yes, and I don't see a difference really between those.
And when you use the word possibly a large animal, that's different than an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, isn't it?
Objection, Your Honor.
In this witness's view. She can answer that.
That's not what the transcript says that he's referring to.
So,
this is Alessi objected all over. And I don't think there was one objection when Alessi was questioning her. But he just constantly objects because she's burying herself in this. Heisenberg says she embarrassed herself yesterday. See, but depending on which side of the aisle, all the free count readers thought she was unstoppable, amazing. So I don't think a jury would take well to Marie Russell. So even if she comes in, I don't think it's going to be helpful for them, because Hank Brennan is working so much on what Lally did too and got criticized for, which was arguing against the innocence fraud campaign of Karen Reed that had been done outside of trial. So debunking that while proving his case, which is why the Commonwealth's case went on for weeks and weeks and weeks. There were so many witnesses. And some who kind of doubled up. I don't know. I'm curious to see how Hank Brennan approaches this trial, if he streamlines it, if it's, I would think it would be a lot less witnesses and shorter. But he's doing very similar technique to what Adam Lawley did. But he's also protesting. He's also working to get ARCA thrown out because they didn't have access to all the evidence. And also working on basically throwing out any defense expert.
He's not asking about the transcript. I'm going to allow the question.
Would you like me to repeat that?
Yes, please.
When you chose the word during your testimony to precisely describe what you thought, and you said possibly a large dog, that is different than to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, isn't it?
No, I don't think so.
You were asked whether or not you could tell what type of animal left these marks, and you said you couldn't with 100% certainty. Isn't that true?
With 100% certainty, that's correct.
And the reason why you don't have certainty when you first testified is because there really is no methodology in identifying dog bite wounds, is there?
But that's incorrect.
I see. When you talk about methodology, is there any standard you're comparing your comparisons to?
There are multiple published peer-reviewed articles that describe what dog bites and dog injuries look like.
Is there any standard that you use? Is there any particular things you look at with specificity that you compare to a standard model?
The pattern.
The standard model of patterns, where do you get that from?
Pattern recognition is used throughout medicine. And, it's something that I have been trained on since actually before medical school, but certainly in medical school.
Pattern recognition, you understand, is different than a standard of comparison. You understand there's a difference between those two things, don't you?
Oh, yes.
Okay. We'll talk about pattern recognition analysis in a minute. But what you're saying is that there's a methodology in identifying dog wounds. I'm asking you, where does that standard come from?
It comes from multiple published peer-reviewed articles.
Okay. Tell me one.
Munich.
I'm sorry?
Munich. We talked about that one last time.
The gentleman who studied human...
You know what this is like? This is like the people that see the Virgin Mary in their toast or on a side of a wall or something. I can't say with 100% certainty that it's a dog. It could be Bigfoot. It could be. We don't know. Just because nobody's seen him doesn't mean it's not possible. That's how outlandish this defense is. My boyfriend's screaming from the other room. She's horrible.
Human teeth.
No, he wrote about dog bites.
Okay. And what's the name of the article that you've relied on?
The name of the article, I have to refer to my report, but it's something to the effect of forensic evaluation of...
Do you have any specific memory about what you're relying on as a standard of comparison to identify dog bite marks?
Yes.
Okay, share that with us.
Again, the standard would be what the wound looks like, and the pattern recognition that goes along with it, along with the configuration of the wounds. It's a multifactorial process.
I'm trying to have you assist us in distinguishing between pattern recognition analysis, which we're going to get to, and when you're looking at a wound, the standards in the science, the standards, the methodology you would actually use to look at it and see if there's points of comparison, to see if there's similarity. What standard are you working with?
I'm not so sure I understand what you mean by standard then, because
I think this, who was it, Maui Swift, who just said she's doing it for the money? In It for the Money. Was that Maui Swift? I think so. Forgive me if it was someone. Yeah, it was. Said Russell was clearly in it for the money. And it reminds me of my song about the Menendez brothers. We did it for the money. But I also think she's in it. She's a woman with great ego needs. She needs to be recognized. There's been articles written about her. And I'm sure she ran down those opportunities as well. So I think she needs to be recognized. She's saying that no one is more qualified than she is in the world. When we know, is it Jim Crosby, the dog bite expert for the Commonwealth, is much more qualified than Marie Russell, much more. I mean, he wrote his thesis, testified in 1 million trials. Yeah, Jim Crosby is his name, about dog bites. So, hey, Eisenberg, when she mentioned she didn't have to see the dog in order to form an opinion, major red flags. Yeah, she doesn't need to see the body. She's seen pictures. She's the most experienced from her work as a doctor. Like I said, I'm an expert on cats. Anyone can have me testify for $600. I've had years, decades of hands-on feline experience. I'm ready to testify about petting, playing, real feeding, taking to the vet. I'm an expert on cats.
I know how I evaluate wounds.
You have personal experience where you've treated dog wounds, and you look at it and you're simply deciding whether or not to you this looks.
That is not to say, like, now I'm forgetting the name of it, but does anybody, my cousin Vinny, does anybody remember my cousin Vinny? You can be qualified as an expert. Does anybody remember Marissa Tomei is qualified as an expert at the end for car mechanics? Because has a lot of knowledge on cars. I don't even think Marissa Tomei would say no one had the expertise that she had. But if you do have a serious expertise that can shed light on the thing, you can be qualified as an expert within reason. But there are problems with Marie Russell. She can't remember one time when she had to identify a bite when someone didn't tell her. That is a problem. That is a problem.
Similar.
I mean, if she had really done the work, like Jim Crosby had this interest and took it all the way, that it comes from an interest. But to never read anything, a book, just read a couple articles and say you have an intense interest.
You're giving your personal.
And by the way, her version of the articles and Hank Brennan's version of what's in those articles is very different. And I would tend to believe Hank Brennan over Marie Russell. And I think I believe 100%, this is my belief. I cannot know for sure. It's just my opinion that Robert Alessi, Karen Reed's new pro bono lawyer, wrote her report for her. It was vastly different than the testimony that she gave at the hearing and at the trial. And you can see when he's asking her questions, he makes all the questions an either or. Is it either this or that? Because he can't trust her to go rogue because she doesn't have the knowledge. He does. He's made himself a dog bite expert, writing her report.
Aside, aren't you?
I actually find that offensive.
Oh, okay. Well, is that what you're doing?
No.
So if you're comparing it to an actual science, a standard, a methodology, I want to learn that methodology from you. So what I'm asking you is, tell us, where does that come from, the methodology where you have a point of comparison, where you look at a wound and you compare it for similarities to another item?
There are several published peer-reviewed articles that describe what to look for, how to observe, evaluate, and then sometimes treat wounds, dog bite wounds. There are, several authors that have published similar things. And in terms of there being an organization that says, here is the standard for dog bite wounds,
Right.
I don't think that there is one.
When you say you don't think there is one, if you're an expert in this field, you would know that there is not one, is there?
There is not one that I know of, correct?
Well, you're not guessing there might be one you don't know of.
I don't know of any published standard by an organization.
So it'd be fair to say, when you are giving an opinion, what you personally believe to be a dog bite wound, there is no standard in dog bite science that shows you what the standard is. There's nothing to compare it to.
Again, it's based on the a combination of the experiences that I've had over the last 30 years, observing, evaluating, and treating dog bite wounds, plus the numerous articles that I have read on dog bite wounds, their characteristics, morphology, patterns, and other things like complications, et cetera.
Okay, so to get back to my question, I know that you're using your experience and your memory, but there is no standard of comparison. There's no methodology that is accepted as a practice.
I disagree.
Okay. Can you share with us one of those articles that you've been relying on to combine with your personal experience to come to conclusions in dog bite analysis?
Well, there's the Munich that we talked about.
I didn't talk about. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Oh, certainly.
Okay, please.
Okay, would you like to go through it together?
I'm asking you to tell us about what you're basing your opinion on, and you said it's Munich, so I don't know much about it.
Okay, so that's one of them.
Well, tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, well, in that article, the authors described a fatal case, but also described what some of the characteristics are in dog bite wound cases. What types of wounds you see, their appearance, their distribution, their configuration, the different aspects like that. Many of them are parallel. Things that would affect the appearance of wounds that physicians know about, such as elasticity of skin and other ways that wounds could be distorted from one to another wound. So you have to know a little bit about wound characteristics, and basically things to look for in the forensic evaluation of dog bite wounds.
Did that article lay out a standard of methodology?
I guess I don't understand what you're.
Right. He's saying, how did you determine this? You say, because she made this claim. So you can see that they have to have some methodology. I would think that that would be the legal standard to have determined something like this. You can't say it just looks like. It's a lot of things that look similar that aren't. An onion and an apple look similar, but they're not, Hey, lazy Susan. I'd like to be a egg breaded expert. He's a good dresser, isn't he? Smart, too, right? I think he knows every sleazy defense trick in the book. That's my feeling on egg breaded. I think he knows his way around the dark nature of our legal system.
Getting at.
Rather than having a particular case study where that article talks about a person that was attacked by a dog and deceased, correct?
In that case,
Yes.
however, it referenced.
I'm sorry, Your Honor, if you could finish the question.
Okay. That article, it was a case report, but it was also a review of previous literature. So in the review of the previous literature that had been published, they came up with recommendations. So yes, there are recommendations in that article.
In that article, it talked about a wound to the neck where the...
You know what it felt like? It felt like she was propped up. She's really not in any way qualified to be an expert. But here's Alessi helping her out from the sidelines. Let her finish the question. Objection. Objection, objection, objection. Let me help you out in the way I question you. Let me write your report for you. My opinion, not fact. There's no way for me to know. Certainly, Hank Brennan noticed quite a difference in her testimony first time round and her report that she wrote, which he seems unfamiliar with, by the way.
Deceased bled to death, correct?
Yes.
Okay. It didn't talk about pattern recognition analysis in that article.
I disagree.
Okay. And did it talk about a standard of practice of methodology?
Recommendations.
No, but that's not what I'm asking you. I'm asking you, did it have a standard, a methodology that it discussed?
These were authors that were practitioners, and they weren't, I don't believe they were in a position to create a standard.
In fact, you can't point to one place where there is a readily accepted standard in the dog bite community for identifying dog bites. You can't point to one article, journal, book.
That's correct.
And so because there is no methodology, anytime somebody has been in contact with the motor vehicle with no broken bones, many times.
I have seen that, yes.
I mean, there's a difference between being run over and hitting the side of a car, isn't there?
That's correct.
So if someone didn't hit them, they just clipped them being run over in the middle of the crosswalk in the middle of the car, yes?
Yes, that'd be correct, but you have to put it in context.
Now, you said in addition to your experience treating injuries, you also have experience as a police officer.
Yes.
Yes. And you've responded to many car collisions as a police officer, didn't you?
I did.
And when you respond to car collisions, whether it's a pedestrian or another car, there are certain things as a detective you detect that are in the street, right?
As a detective?
Yeah, a detective or a police officer, as you go to a scene and there's a collision, you certainly see things often as a result of the collision, don't you?
Yes.
Tell us some of the things that you'll see as a police officer after a collision. What do you see?
After a collision, you oftentimes see debris from the car.
Right,
From the
debris
vehicles,
from the car.
yes.
You can see rubber, right?
Probably. I don't know if I have, but yes.
Sometimes metal.
Right. So now she's back walking her back because she knows she's walking right into a trap. There's all this taillight evidence. We found out about all, we'd heard about this taillight in John O'Keefe's shirt, pieces of taillight. And of course, this is such a lawyerly thing to pick out. But Hank Brennan mistakenly calls it glass, Karen Reed's taillight, when it's plastic. And Alessi makes a big deal about that. Karen Reed also got called out. Let me show you. Hold on 1 second. Let me just pull up Twitter for a second. Karen Reed got called out for her faces, something that I've been talking about. In trial. Hold on 1 second. Let me just pull this out. I'll share my screen. At sidebar, this is Masshole Mafia. At sidebar, Karen Reed's attorneys were reprimanded by Judge Canone and told to tell their client to stop glaring, making faces, and making comments. Things are totally fine, though. Everyone stay calm and open your wallets. But she's been doing that since the beginning. And I've been surprised that she hasn't been called out before. So that's just for this.
Parts of the car.
Right.
And sometimes when there's a collision, maybe often, you see glass, don't you?
Yes, you do.
Yeah, glass breaks when a car collides with something, oftentimes, doesn't it?
Yes.
And so when you were doing this, engaging in this differential diagnosis, did you consider the circumstances, the physical evidence at the scene from where Mr.
Right. Kim K says, I think your testimony would help the state, to be honest. Might. However, I think back to my time as a juror in a criminal trial last year, and it was the essay of a child, and the child victim had become a teenager and testified. So it was very little, no physical evidence, etc. Just, it was really very much like a they said, he said type thing. So her mother and grandmother and the victim. And the accused testified, and 11 of us who voted guilty right away met up with one holdout who found him very credible. So there might be one juror who finds her very credible. And that is what Hank Brennan is trying to avoid, though one or two jurors that might hold up a conviction and say, well, no, I liked Marie Russell. We were all like, what? You found him credible? I'm talking about the jurors, my fellow jurors. We're all like, she's like, I don't know. She didn't have any reason. Just, I found him credible. Then we had to go through. It was a frustrating deliberation for me.
I considered the possibilities, yes.
Okay, well, there's a phrase, getting knocked out of one's shoes. You've heard that phrase, right?
I've heard the phrase.
Well, you've heard the phrase in relation to car collisions, haven't you? A person getting knocked out of their shoes.
And other things, yes.
Yeah, but not other things. We're talking about car collisions.
Okay.
That's what we want to talk about today.
Okay.
You've heard the phrase, knocked out of one's shoes in car collisions, haven't you?
Yes.
Yes, because the force is so great when a car hits a body, it moves the body and the shoe from friction on the ground can sometimes.
Wow, my father's alibi. Thanks. That's so generous of you. Such appreciation for you and your amazing mod. Maestro is amazing. Thank you for holding down the chat. I appreciate it. And thank you, Allison. I really appreciate that. $65 CJ5 says, I found a book titled Horrors of the Court. Oh, you did. The fraud of psychiatric testimony and the, I'll just say essay, but different word, of American justice. Oh, I'll have to read that. That'd be interesting to read. Interesting. That's funny. So what 65, hold on one second. Let me pull it up. I pulled off all my own videos off of my computer, or a lot of them. So let me just go to my channel and I will show you what we're referring to. And for all the people that already know, thank you for being patient and are like, oh no, not this again, not this video again. But yes, this, I think it's only what, 31 seconds. So hang tight, guys. So this is what Dominic Dunn, the writer who is also victim's family member, his daughter was murdered. But he wrote for Vanity Fair, and he used to call these kind of experts like Marie Russell, etc., horrors of the court. So here he is talking about it, expert witnesses in wealthy people's trials.
I only cover the trials of the rich, powerful, and famous because it is different for them than for other people, because they've got the bucks to spend on the $1 million lawyers, and they've got the bucks to bring in the expert witnesses Jurors fall for those expert witnesses every time. I call them whores of the court because they can be bought by either side.
So there you go. There you go. There you go. That is what we're referring to.
Be left behind. Yes?
I don't know the actual causation, but yes.
Well, you did know in your review of this case that at the very area where that car backed up and Mr. O'Keefe was found, one of his sneakers was found next to the curb on the street. You know that, don't you?
Objection, Your Honor.
Are you aware of that fact?
No.
Okay, next question.
You were never given any of the information, the physical evidence at the scene where Mr. O'Keefe was found to help you engage in this differential diagnosis?
I eventually saw reports.
So you do know. You do know about the sneaker.
I also, well, I don't know that. I don't know where the sneaker was found, no.
Well, what do you know about the sneaker? It sounds like you know a little bit about the sneaker. Tell us
No,
what you...
I know that in hypothermia, there's a condition called paradoxical undressing, where people are sometimes are found without their clothes and shoes, because and in this case there was hypothermia.
Do you have any opinion that Mr. O'Keefe undressed his shoe before he died?
I have no opinion about that.
Do you have any information, evidence to support such a comment like that?
I'm just advising you that there is a phenomenon called paradoxical undressing, so that is possibly a cause.
Well, in that phenomenon, does somebody take off one shoe and leave all the...
This is so ridiculous. And this is something I thought of, and I thought that maybe the defense would do. Because I had a boss who was obsessed with this fact, so that when you're freezing to death, often people will take off their clothes and they think that they're been SA'd or something like that. So she thinks John O'Keefe took off one shoe because of hypothermia. He was because when you have hypothermia, you feel hot right before you pass on. And she thinks that John O'Keefe decided to take off his one shoe and only got that far. I mean, she is reaching so far for these ridiculous defense theories called the hired gun for the defense, and will not consider that it possibly could be a motor vehicle. When I know if she says she's seen hundreds of thousands of dog bites, or underestimating 500 to 1,000, but she later goes on to say hundreds of thousands, then she had to also see tons of motor vehicle accidents, and some of them looking like this. Some of them could not have been head on, all hit full body. Some of them had to be clipped, holding things like glasses from a bar, not eyeglasses, but a glass from a bar like John O'Keefe was. Do you think these innocence fraud people stage her? What do you mean, Tammy? I mean that I think that she was really... sorry, Tammy, I'll pull up your question. Do I think that innocence fraud people stage her? No, I think she will get into this kind of line of work. I think innocence fraud lawyers are paying attention and might use her for something else in another trial, because she's obviously will say anything you want for money. But I don't think she's impressive. And I think they're going to be hard pressed to find another expert. I know we heard a lawyer say you can always find another expert. There's always someone willing to basically lie for money is what they mean. But they also have to balance that with their reputation. So I don't know. Unless you want to get in on I don't know. There's a lot of fraudulent experts going around. So, but I can't imagine in dog bites with this. I mean, this is so much evidence points to a car. Karen Reed's own words, which was pointed out by Hank Brennan. The car data. the physical evidence. I mean, I guess they can try next time to say it was all planted. Go full OJ.
There are other clothes on?
It's possible they could, yeah.
Right. And you have a case that you've seen
No,
just like that?
I have not.
No. Okay. And so in this case, at what point did you learn that Mr. O'Keefe was knocked out of his shoe?
I don't know.
Objection, Your Honor.
Phrase it differently.
At what point in this case did you learn that Mr. O'Keefe's body was about 7 feet off the street, fully clothed, not undressing himself, and that his sneaker was on the roadway right next to the curb?
Objection, Your Honor. Same papers.
So, did you learn that fact?
No,
Next question.
So as you sit here and testify today, you didn't know that?
that's correct.
When you're ruling out car collision,
I mean, there's another thing. She knows nothing about this case. Only she wanted to help the defense desperately. I find her a dark figure. Does anyone else find her dark? And I find her so disturbed that you want to help out. I mean, not just for money, but for her own ego. And she's sitting in the same tiny courtroom with John O'Keefe's family. And just flying by the seat of her pants. I mean, zero, absolute 100% fraudster, in my opinion, zero integrity, my opinion.
in your differential diagnosis, wouldn't it be helpful to know a little bit about the physical evidence of where it was found at the scene?
Again, my focus is injuries. The injuries caused by car accidents, not the scene itself, injuries. So that's what I focused in.
A dog wouldn't knock somebody out of their shoe, would they?
Excuse me?
A dog wouldn't knock somebody out of their shoe, would they?
I don't think so.
Okay. When you are excluding car collision as the cause of these abrasions, and you consider circumstantial evidence as a police officer, if there was trace evidence on that shattered taillight, would you want to know about that?
Yes, I would.
Yes. And DNA is a form of trace evidence, isn't it?
Yes.
It's a pretty sound piece of trace evidence, wouldn't you say?
Yes, if collected properly and chain of evidence, yes.
Right. One of the most formidable pieces of scientific evidence that is used in medicine and science, isn't it?
In forensics.
And so when you used differential diagnosis and excluded the car collision as the cause of the abrasions to John O'Keefe's arm, did you know that there was DNA on the taillight of the defendant's car?
I did not know that.
Would you want to have known if there was DNA, particularly would you want to have known if the DNA on the taillight of the shattered taillight was John O'Keefe's DNA? Would you want to know that in your differential diagnosis?
That would be helpful. However, again, that the car accident did not cause that configuration of wounds.
And when you're considering the cause of the wounds and you're trying to rule out car accident, you know that that taillight had been shattered, leaving glass and jagged edges. If you had known there was John O'Keefe's DNA on that taillight, would have you wanted to have taken a closer study of the taillight casing and the broken glass?
I don't think it was necessary. Those wounds are so characteristic of a dog attack.
Do you know there was other trace evidence on the back of Miss Reed's car that morning?
Such as?
Hair?
No.
You didn't know that one of John O'Keefe's hair was left on the bumper?
No.
And engaging in your...
So my boyfriend just came in the room, and he was someone we used to actually, when I first covered Karen Reed, he used to come on and argue the free Karen Reed side, because what was the thing that was most convincing to you?
It was, to me, it was the dog bite. The dog bite to me, when I was a little kid, thank God I wasn't injured, but a dog bit my arm, and the way they bit my arm was they grabbed my arm really hard, and then their bite slipped a little, and they bit down again. And to me, what was the injury on his arm looked like that's what happened. A dog bit and then released and bit again. Like, you know, it was like the arm was pulling away, and that's what that looked like.
So what convinced you it wasn't a dog?
Only that mountain of other evidence that it wasn't a dog. I mean, okay, the DNA evidence, what this attorney just brought up, the DNA evidence on the car, and
the glass in his shirt.
Yeah, the whole
own words.
Yeah, I mean, there's just too much other stuff that happened, and her behavior, all the stuff you talk about. I mean, to me, it seems overwhelming. Like, looking back, I'm surprised. Looking back, I'm surprised I had that position at all.
Right. What you think the appeal is the hate, the blue line of wall of silence aspect?
Yes. People are suspicious of police for a lot of reasons, and a lot of those reasons are good reasons. But in this situation, I think I definitely went in with a bias, and I changed my mind. You changed my mind.
Okay. All right. Just a little bit from a former, very short-lived free Karen Reed. But maybe they used to say, honey, you're wrong. It's a dog bite. It's a dog bite. I'm telling you. Like, I don't think so.
Differential diagnosis. Considering the mechanic of injury, wouldn't it be important to know that the trace evidence coming from John O'Keefe was left not only on the defendant's car, but in the particular area where the damage to the car, the taillight?
Objection, Your Honor.
Were you aware of that fact, Dr. Russell?
No.
Next question.
When you were excluding a car collision as the cause, did anybody share with you the digital forensics, the black box information showing and demonstrating where the car was, the speed it went back, and the distance? Did anybody share that with you?
No.
Did you know that John O'Keefe had a cell phone?
Not surprised.
Mm-hmm. And do you know that at a certain point when that car left, his cell phone, which was found near his body, never moved? Did you know that?
I read that, yes.
Okay. And when you were using differential diagnosis and thinking about the potential causes of abrasions in the arm, did it seem important to you that all these facts coincided? The car reversed, the damage, John O'Keefe on the ground, the phone under him?
Objection, Your Honor.
I'm going to allow that question.
Did you consider those things, Dr. Russell?
As I mentioned earlier, I considered various possibilities of a car accident, and a pedestrian accident, I should say. And I went through many scenarios in my head, and no car accident scenario could create that configuration of wounds that's on the arm.
You've done advanced studies on wounds related to car accidents and broken taillights?
I've seen thousands.
Oh, yeah. Have you done any studies? Do you have any journals that you rely on to say that there's a expected pattern that's going to happen when a taillight intrudes through a sweater and into one's skin?
Yes, there are many textbooks that I have relied on.
So she says there's many textbooks, but then she said she never so I guess it's in a textbook, dog bites, but it's not the whole book.
It's a fundamental area of study in forensic medicine and emergency medicine. And in fact, the examination of the exterior of the body in a motor vehicle accident case is emphasized, and special lectures are given about that topic to the forensic doctors.
You never examined John O'Keefe's body?
By photographs, yes.
You never examined his body?
Personally, no.
No, personally, you. You never examined his body.
I never touched his body. I examined
No,
the photographs
you
that were taken in the hospital and in the coroner's office, medical examiner's office.
When you're treating at the hospital and people are coming in telling you there was a dog bite, you're relying on that reporter's history, aren't you?
Usually, yes.
Or an eyewitness who saw it and told you.
So her top lip starts to curl up, showing contempt for Hank Brennan. Did anybody just see that micro? It's not even a micro expression. It's held pretty long. Can't miss it. Her top lip curls while he's asking questions. Watch her face while he asks questions. You'll see it again.
About it.
Correct.
When I asked you before when we were here the last time about any cases where you had to make a diagnosis without information, you couldn't point to one. I asked you to give me one example, and you couldn't give me an example, could you?
I don't remember patients' names.
And so when you rely on the reporter as a medical expert, you take what they say, right, and you assume it's true.
Oh, not always. No.
I see. You
No,
look and see if it's
absolutely
not.
Why people do not tell the truth.
Did somebody ever come in and say it was a dog bite and you did differential diagnosis and pattern recognition analysis and determined they were lying, it was not a dog bite?
No.
In all the hundreds, thousands of cases, never has anybody reported to you a dog bite and you determined independently through your powers that it wasn't a dog bite.
Not dog bites, but other wounds, gunshot wounds, stab wounds, many other kinds of wounds. People report that they occur a certain way, and
Right. So people don't want to say that how they got shot or who shot them. Surprise, big surprise, or stabbed. But dog bite wounds, everyone tells you it's a dog. But that I find odd, because wouldn't somebody cover up for a dog that they wouldn't want to put down? I call BS on how many dog bites you see. I still say 500 to 1,000 seems high in the ER.
and actually they have occurred.
Like I said, I had my right side of my face ripped off by a dog. And they were like, "Can't help you." My mom came in holding me, running into the ER. They were like, "No thanks. Go to a plastic surgeon." And I had to wait 7 or 8 hours while a woman got a facelift with a glove full of crushed ice on my wound, waiting to go in. But so I don't know. I just call nonsense on this.
Different way.
On the 500 number.
With respect to dog bites,
Mm-hmm.
every time you've treated a patient, they've either told you what happened or somebody with them has told you what happened.
Or they didn't know what happened.
Okay. In this case, when you were excluding the collision as the cause of the abrasions on Mr. O'Keefe's arm, did you look at witness statements?
As far as I know, there were no witnesses to the event.
Okay, well, did you read the testimony of Officer Sarif? Because the witness who talked to him was Karen Reed. Did you read that?
Objection, Your Honor.
So ask the question differently, Mr. Brennan.
Okay. Did you know that Officer Sarif reported that Karen Reed said, "This is all my fault. This is my fault. I did this." Did you consider that or know about that when you made your differential diagnosis regarding the collision?
At some point, I did know that there was a statement like that.
Well, not like that. Did you know about this?
Did you know about this statement? Did you know that there were multiple statements made by Karen Reed? There was, if you had been recalling those statements that Karen Reed, you would put them in the 500 to 1,000 category.
Statement. This is all my fault. This is my fault. I did this. Did you know about this statement?
Objection, Your Honor.
Did you know that statement? I'm allowing a question.
No.
Let's move on.
Did you know about the statement to Mr. Flamati? I hit him, oh my God, I hit him. Did you know about that statement?
Not that statement, no.
Did you know about the statement that she repeated repeatedly? I hit him. I hit him. Did you know about that?
I learned that there was some question about whether there was a statement or a question, did I hit him? I learned that. But that doesn't, I mean, okay.
Where did you learn that from?
I don't remember.
Okay. You said that you had experience in domestic violence cases?
Yes.
Okay. Did you know that it's reported that the defendant and Mr. O'Keefe got in an argument shortly before this happened?
Yes.
This interested me muchly because this is my theory of the case. So he's bringing up DV, and my theory is that Karen, if this, and it's also shared by Boundless Millennial, he said if Karen were a man and John O'Keefe were a woman, it would have been very hard to run this innocence fraud campaign. He didn't, not his words, my words. However, I believe Karen was abusive to John O'Keefe. I think she's a psychopath, which means she's also a narcissist. And by the end, she discarded him. Devalued, discarded. And when he said, I'm out of here, as he tried to before, he tried to kick her out of the house and she wouldn't leave. She did what she was fantasizing about. Hit him with her car and left him to die in the cold. There are all these, let me see, all these advertisements about dressing for warm weather. It's been freezing cold in New York City. She could not have not noticed John O'Keefe's habit of not wearing a coat and thought about it. Well, if he was ever incapacitated, unwittingly, out in the cold, sure would be bad for him. Remember, to Karen Reed's own words, I'm paraphrasing, to think that this wasn't planned is a mistake. Plan was to teach John a lesson at minimum. There's Karen Reed trying to teach John O'Keefe a lesson. You don't leave me.
When you were considering the cause of these injuries, did you consider Miss Reed's statements herself to not just witnesses, but to the public, to national magazines and programs? Did you consider any of that?
I don't read the national magazines.
Well, would it help you if you knew she told Boston Magazine that maybe John hit the back of her car, telling her to stop, and then she ran over his foot, or she clipped him in the knee, and in his drunkenness he passed out? Would that help in your differential diagnosis?
Objection, Your Honor.
I'm going to allow that.
It wouldn't help because those wounds were caused by a dog.
Well, if you believe that statement that she said about running over his foot and clipping him, it would help you conclude that it wasn't a straight-on accident, that it was on the side, right?
Objection, Your Honor.
I'm going to allow it.
Even if it were on the side, the car did not cause those injuries.
And we talked.
Alessi, no matter how many times you say objection with that absolutely outraged voice, an appalled voice, objection, Your Honor, I'm outraged. It's not going to work every time. Robert, I'm talking about Robert Alessi, Karen Reed's new pro bono
Well, when
lawyer.
someone's hit on the side, they could brace or defend themselves, correct?
Oh, correct.
Right. And did you know that if John O'Keefe was standing up and his arm was bent, it would be about the same height as that taillight?
Yes, that I understand. I've been hit on the side. I know about side injuries, side swipe injuries.
Yeah, a clip. It's different, right? And so knowing that his height matches up with the taillight, what other evidence would you want to know before you excluded the taillight as a cause of injury? To be thorough, what else would you want to know?
Well, see pictures of the fragments of the taillight, which I eventually did, and were there any pieces of metal that had the configuration, anything that could cause those parallel lines with the punctate injuries in between.
How about taillight fragments?
Yes.
Little pieces of glass, right? When glass shatters, it shatters randomly, doesn't it?
Well, it depends on what kind of glass. So,
I find it hard to believe that every time she's seen parallel lines with punctures in between, I mean, I cut it out just because there's so much to go through, and I may only get through half of this today. Let's see where I am. Yeah, I'm going awfully slowly through this. So we may come back tomorrow and deal with the rest of this. I think Hank Brennan's closing was excellent and needs its own some space to look at it. But I mean, I really find it hard to believe that anytime she saw parallel lines with punctures in between, she was determined that it was a dog bite, no matter what the patient told her. Or even when they couldn't tell her. Remember that? I can't get over that, guys. I mean, how embarrassing to get caught in a lie. There were times when I just couldn't. I had to evaluate where the patient couldn't tell me for one reason. Either they were incapacitated or passed out or didn't speak English. I had to determine it was a dog bite. So tell me, Dr. Russell, tell me about one of those times. I don't remember. Seriously. You had to at least have one in mind if it was a real memory. It's just nonsense.
I'm sorry, please.
It depends on what kind of glass.
I want you.
Well, motor vehicle glass, a lot of motor vehicle glass is tempered glass, and that shatters a certain way.
Okay.
And creates a characteristic injuries.
Okay. Tell me about your experience in Lexus rear taillight coverings. What is the pattern injury on that?
I'm not aware of any pattern injuries.
And are you aware when the rear taillight of a Lexus breaks, the different pieces it breaks into? Is it random or is there a standard in how it breaks?
I'm not sure, but I have an idea.
I'm sorry?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Did you look at any photographs of the scene in the debris field showing the different size taillight fragments at the very scene where Mr. O'Keefe was found on the ground? Did you look at any of those photographs?
I attempted to, but I couldn't see much detail.
Okay,
Photographs were not good.
Okay, so you don't really have a command of what the debris field looked like relative to the taillight fragments that were on the ground that morning.
Again, I imagine various scenarios of what broken glass and taillight would look like. And again, I could not come up with any scenario that would cause those parallel marks and the pattern that we described.
Well, I don't need you to imagine a scenario. I only want to talk about one scenario. That's the scenario that led to the death of Mr. O'Keefe that morning. That's the scenario I'm asking you about. And the debris field that actually existed that morning. So what I'm asking you, when you engage in differential diagnosis and you take the position that this couldn't have happened, I need to understand what you actually know about the physical evidence that's at the scene. So that's what I'm going to ask you about, that scene. If you don't know, it's okay. But I want to ask you about that scene that morning. Do you know how many pieces of taillight were found on the ground where Mr. O'Keefe was found?
No.
Do you know the shapes and sizes of the shattered parts of the taillight that were found in that debris field where Mr. O'Keefe was found?
I've seen a picture of various pieces of taillight, yes.
And if you've seen that, you would see that there are a number of different pieces of shattered taillight, yes?
Correct.
Of different sizes.
Yeah.
Of different shapes.
Uh-huh.
Different diameters, right?
So this is Boundless Millennial's work. I'm just going to show really quickly without the sound on. This is his short. Let me just share my screen. 1 minute, please. Where you can see how the taillight matches the wounds. So my apology for anyone watching. So there's the parallel lines, and can I get a Tito's in prison? So that's just a little bit of his work. Check out his whole video if you want to see more. I'll try to put the link in the description of this episode. I just hadn't planned on sharing it, but thought it was very crafty the way he put it together.
Yes, they're irregular, very irregular.
Different, irregular.
Yeah.
Irregular. Many of them sharp.
Yes,
Perhaps almost all of them. Yes?
possibly. Yes.
Well, you say possibly because you never actually have looked at the physical evidence. You just looked at a couple of photos.
I looked at photos, correct.
And as far as the housing for the taillight, what is that made out of?
I believe it's made out of a plastic, and there's a metal around it.
It's metal.
Yeah.
What's the shape of the metal around it?
What's the shape?
Yeah, what is it, when you're describing the metal that you saw, what does it look like?
Well, it looked like there was some curves in it.
Curves?
Yeah.
Any straight lines in it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any jagged parts of it from the breaking?
Yes.
Okay. And inside, were there other parts other than just the casing?
Right. So there's the casing of the taillight, which is what Boundless Millennial really is honing in on. Any straight lines? Yes. Yep, sure were. This is why I don't think she is convinced that it is a dog. I just think she desperately needs to be recognized. And she wants to make a career as an expert. She's paying, according to Patty from Patty's Playhouse, $700 to be listed as an expert.
Like wires or metal sticking out?
Yes.
How many pieces?
On the, was it CERTA website?
I don't know how many.
Did you ever measure those angles or study the angles of the pieces of metal and the casing?
No.
And you never...
I don't think it was brought up. Exoteria is asking how much did this lady get paid under the table. Well, it's not under the table. Usually they're asked. She may have done this, I wouldn't think so, but may have done it pro bono to start her career as an expert in this area. But I would think that they would have to pay for all her flights. She lives in California, etc. And this is the second time she's had to appear.
Studied the angles, I took measurements. Okay. Now, sharp objects can cause puncture wounds, can't they?
Yes.
Sharp objects can go through clothes and tear a... No, let me finish. You can answer. Sharp objects can puncture a hole through something like a sweater, can't they?
They can.
And if that object comes back out, it can pull the threads back out with it, couldn't it?
Theoretically, yes.
Yeah. And a sharp object, like glass, can poke or push a hole in a tear in a sweater and then rub up against the skin, causing an abrasion, couldn't it?
And, well, yes. Yes.
And if the glass and the angles and the shattering is irregular, it could cause irregular type abrasions.
Not like that pattern, no.
That's not what I'm asking you. I'm asking you, can irregular glass that penetrates a sweatshirt or a sweater and rubs up against the skin, can it cause irregular looking abrasions?
Yes.
And if there's two pieces of metal or glass that are straight, could it cause a linear abrasion?
Yes.
Would you agree with this statement? In a car accident, linear wounds are most commonly caused by contact with shattered glass from the windows, particularly tempered glass, which breaks into small, sharp shards that can create linear cuts on the skin when the body impacts it during the collision. These are often referred to as dicing injuries in forensic medicine.
Yes, and so they're not really very long, linear.
Who just asked about lower jaw jutting? Apparently it means you're angry. If you're jutting your lower jaw out and frequently precedes violence. So whoever asked, what does it mean when you jut your lower jaw? Something that Marie Russell also does, in addition to kind of snarling her upper lip.
They are tiny linear abrasions or lacerations.
Abrasions come in all different sizes.
Right, but the ones that are caused by tempered glass are very, very characteristic.
Does glass...
Very, very characteristic. And she was fired from her job as an EMT and then went to work at a jail. I mean, EMT, doctor in an emergency room. Excuse me. Not an EMT. That's not correct. Doctor in an emergency room. Okay. Let's hit your questions, comments before we go on, just as a little break, and then we'll get back to some of this.
We got your comments. You had something to say. You were insightful. Oh, so clever. So Roberta's gonna read your comments. Hey, Roberta, read those comments.
Stephen Shem says, I just found out the defense doesn't want the mold of Chloe's mouth. Jackpot. Very interesting. Why not? I heard the same thing. Watching the Whack Job says, Russell, quote, I did not want to get involved with the case. I just thought I should, as there are very few people in the country who have the combination of experience I do, unquote. Long since put out to pasture prison doctor who was crap at that job and got demoted, because ending your brilliant career as a prison doctor is where all brilliant ER doctors who save lives and highly accredited experts in dog bites whose expertise is so rare in the U.S. end up. Buddy, true. I thought it was the hospital. Am I wrong? Is it the prison where she got demoted? CJSP4 says, I tried posting a link to this, but it didn't work. I guess Karen lost it in court today. Mentioned this before. Don't know if I was the only one who missed it because I was working, but in case we all did, I thought I would share it. Word from inside the court. The sidebar at about an hour or so into the hearing was a result of Karen Reed's outburst to Hank. Are you mad? She said. Even sober, she can't control her anger. Imagine after 9 drinks with a 6,000-pound weapon. She likes feeling the full force of her power, I think.
Cause a slicing pattern.
It can.
And it can cause a linear abrasion.
Yes, but there's a specific pattern with tempered glass.
I understand that you have an opinion.
Oh, no, it's fact.
Okay.
It's in textbooks.
Yeah, it's in textbooks that glass can cause linear abrasions.
The tempered glass pattern is in textbooks.
Okay. Glass from this broken taillight could cause linear abrasions.
That probably, yes, I agree.
Okay. So the glass that was in this debris field that you got a little look at, it had sharp edges, some of it, right? Yes?
Yeah, I imagine so. I don't know for sure.
Okay. Do you know if it had parallel edges?
Parallel?
Yes.
I don't know.
Okay. Now, when you're looking for trace evidence to see if something caused an injury, you look for remnants of that, of the actual Mr. O'Keefe's body, right?
I did not have hands-on study, correct.
But you did learn that there was something remarkable in Mr. O'Keefe's sweater, didn't you?
Can you be more specific?
I can. Glass shards or broken taillight plastic shards. You understand they were found in Mr. O'Keefe's sweater, right?
Doesn't surprise me.
Well, I know it doesn't surprise you, but the question I'm asking you is when you decided to engage in differential diagnosis and you decided to...
It doesn't surprise me. When dogs attack, sometimes they like to attack the back of cars and they chew up the taillights and they spit it on their victims. I mean, that's what I think she's going to say next. Why doesn't it surprise her? Wouldn't it surprise her if he wasn't hit by a car? That there were taillight pieces in his shirt? That doesn't surprise her? Why not? This is where lawyers, I think, just a non-lawyer opinion, mess up by not asking by not listening. If you listen to my interviews with John Lewin about cross-examination and direct, what he does so well is listen and respond. If you saw the clip I played yesterday of his brilliant cross-examination of Dr. Elizabeth Loftus, what he said to me was that lawyers are taught that the question is everything and the answer is unimportant. And he says that's so arrogant. He says, what I like to do is ask questions of which there are no good answers. But here, she gives him a great point to go into. Why aren't you surprised? Why doesn't it surprise you? Because lawyers are so afraid that the defendant is going to have, the person testifying is going to have a win or go in a direction that they don't want to go. Control is everything. But with Dr. Russell, I think I would feel confident asking her why she's not surprised and have her opine something ridiculous and then ask another question about it, because her knowledge is so thin that to go deeper on it is only is going to make her look bad.
Exclude collision as the cause of this abrasion. Didn't you want to know all the facts and information in considering whether it was the taillight that caused the abrasion? Didn't you want to know that information?
Yes.
Okay. And when you were considering that information, did you know from the criminalistics reports that shards of that broken taillight were littered in his sweater?
I did not know that.
When's the first time you learned of that?
Right now.
Right now. And so when you've prepared for this case and you've received materials from the defense, nobody has ever sent.
I'm so surprised that Alessi didn't stop and object and say, but it was a sweatshirt, not a sweater.
You ever the criminalistics reports that show taillight shards were in his sweater where the abrasion was. No one ever showed you that?
I don't recall seeing that at all.
Oh boy. Well, talking about being a detective and using circumstantial evidence and trace evidence, I want you now to consider this new evidence that you didn't know before you testified at the voir dire in the trial in the first Lanigan hearing.
Objection,
I want you to...
I'm sorry.
So let's hear the question first.
When you were ruling out the taillight as the mechanism of injury, when you excluded it in your different...
Wow, Judge Cannoni could have really gone to town on Alessi. Alessi, who's objecting about not letting Dr. Russell finish her answers as she's trailing off before Hank Brennan asks another question, broke in with an objection a couple words into Hank Brennan's question. Let him finish his question before you object.
Differential diagnosis. And you said to a reasonable degree of medical certainty that these injuries that you looked at were caused by a dog bite. Now that you know that there's a debris field of shattered taillight right near the body of Mr. O'Keefe, and now that you know in his very sweater with the abrasions, the same arm under them, is littered with shards of taillight from that Lexus, does that in any way change your analysis in your differential diagnosis, excluding the car as the mechanic of injury for that abrasion?
Objection, Your Honor.
So I'm going to allow that minus the police officer part, the detective part.
No, it doesn't change my my conclusion that those injuries, those abrasions, were caused by a dog bite.
How do you think the shards of taillight got into his sweater?
They could have got into the sweater from an accident, correct?
From an impact with the taillight, yes?
Could be.
Right. And when the taillight breaks and there's jagged, irregular...
Right, so she thinks that a dog bit him before he got into a motor vehicle accident? Is that what she's saying? What is she saying? What is another reason?
Linear sharp edges from that break. What do you think is going to happen to the skin when those shards impact the skin?
They could cause injury, yes.
They could cause puncture wounds, couldn't they?
Yes, they could.
They could cause scratches, couldn't they? I need to ask you the question so you can answer my question. They could cause scratches, couldn't they?
They could cause scratches.
Mm-hmm. And you have no studies on how abrasion looks after an impact.
She's going to call them scratches. Correct him and say abrasions. Scratches, abrasions. I'm going to use the medical term. Don't forget I'm a medical doctor. The arrogance.
With a taillight that is shattered. You don't have any studies or comparative analysis there, do you?
I have no studies. I just have my years of experience.
You know what wasn't found for trace evidence in that sweater? DNA of a dog.
I understand that.
You know when dogs bite, saliva, foam, sweat in their mouth, correct?
I also understand that there were issues with the collection.
Well, we're going to get to your claims and see if there's any basis for it, but that's not the question I asked you, but I will invite you to talk about that in a second. Looking forward to that. What I'm asking you, you know when dogs bite, they can froth at the mouth.
Yes.
Sweat.
Probably.
Yeah. Saliva.
Saliva, yes.
Right? And when they get active and aggressive, it increases the production of those viscous materials, doesn't it?
I believe so.
Yeah. Well, it's in some of those studies and reports.
Right. She should know for sure. She believes so. She doesn't even know. She's supposed to be an expert, doesn't know. So that the dog salivates more when it's biting and about to
Some books you've studied all these years, isn't it? That that's exactly what happens?
That they increase
their saliva, hence for the potential for more DNA. But she's convinced that the DNA got washed away with the snow. I had a fun time putting this dog head on Alessi's. Did anyone notice? On Alessi's body.
Production
Yes.
of saliva? No, I haven't seen that,
Okay.
but it makes sense.
And so when the dog bites a person, if they're biting through material, that saliva naturally could be embedded in the material, couldn't it?
Could be, yes.
Yeah. And something like a sweater, right? It traps liquid, doesn't it? Been out in the rain in the sweater. You don't want to wear a sweater in the rain. You'd be soaking all day, right?
That makes sense,
Yeah.
yes.
There was no dog DNA found anywhere on the holes in that sweater, was there?
No.
You understand that the crime lab took swabs of every one of those holes, right?
I don't know how many holes they took, but
Well,
yes.
before you
multiple.
discount or allege a conspiracy about DNA taint, wouldn't you want to know what they did before you criticize them?
I know that they took swabs.
Okay. Do you know that they took swabs of every hole?
No.
Do you know that they then packaged them and they tested and they sent them to UC Davis?
I know there was an interval of time
Well,
between the...
people are exonerated.
Hold it. I just need to hear the answer. Next question, please.
People are exonerated decades after they've been wrongfully convicted based on...
Oh, let me tell you about that. Often it's that no DNA was found, not someone else's DNA. Oh, don't even get me started on the whole misuse of DNA to exonerate people. I was disappointed to hear Hank Brennan go in this direction.
Yes?
Yes.
DNA lasts for a long time sometimes, doesn't it?
It can.
Okay. And so you know that the DNA or the samples that were swabbed from the sweater was sent to you.
I'm not saying that the people haven't been exonerated by DNA evidence, but like there's the Michael Morton in California, but the majority of these cases, they pick things that they know or hope wouldn't be touched by the perpetrator, or they know that it was a group crime and someone else was involved. There's so much manipulation of DNA with the wrongful conviction movement.
UC Davis, you know that.
Yes.
And you know when they did the analysis, there was no dog DNA.
Right.
Right, on any of those holes.
Right.
And you've opined that these are bites, teeth going in and out of those holes all the way up and down the arm.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, it is remarkable that there is no dog DNA on any of those holes in the sweater, isn't it?
Again, there's an issue with the collection and transportation of that.
I'd love to talk to you about that. We're going to, but you've got to get through my questions first. It is remarkable as it...
Right. So this is exactly what Dr. Elizabeth Loftus did when so Tim Hennis was a man who was accused of killing a mama, her babies, and he left one baby who lived miraculously. He was too young to identify him. And he was convicted the first time around. The second time around, Elizabeth Loftus testified that the eyewitnesses' identification were the worst identifications she's ever seen, most flimsy identifications, and got him off. And then toured these Innocence Project conventions with Tim Hennis, went on talk shows with Tim Hennis, like the Joan Rivers show, talking all about this wrongfully convicted man, toured him around as wrongfully convicted. There was a made-for-TV movie with Ricky Schroeder called Innocent Victims. You can watch it on YouTube, all about poor Tim Hennis was convicted and finally was exonerated in the second trial. Lo and behold, DNA comes up, and Katie Eastburn, who was the mama in that case, inside her is, lo and behold, Tim Hennis's DNA. When Elizabeth Loftus was confronted why, and he was tried and is on military death row, why she is still teaching the Tim Hennis case as a case of a wrongful conviction to her students, she said, well, she thinks she went the same route as Dr. Russell, that there was problems with the DNA, that it was maybe somehow corrupted. She doesn't know how, and she's not an expert on DNA. Same is almost identical line of BS that she puts out. Unreal. So here, because there's no dog DNA, it was corrupted. It got washed away by the snow. There was a problem with the collection that she imagined.
Doctor.
I just want to hear her theory as to what happened. I'd like to hear Dr. Russell's theory as to what happened here.
As a scientist, that there is no dog DNA in any of those swabs or holes. It's remarkable, isn't it?
Remarkable would not be the word I use.
Extraordinary.
No, I disagree.
Hard to believe.
I disagree.
Okay. Now, there is no dog DNA. Do you think somehow that hurts your cause or your case for your opinion?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Do you think that somehow challenges your opinion that there's no dog?
Jennifer Ray, we're waiting back for the Supreme Court to decide whether they can charge her with the second-degree charge, the bigger charges in this case.
DNA?
No.
Because many times you've interrupted and tried to talk about a suggested or a supposed taint that doesn't exist. And I'm just curious, why is it so important for you to discount the fact that dog DNA does not exist on any of those holes?
Objection, Your Honor.
I'm going along.
I'm aware of many of the steps that are involved in the collection, preservation, transportation of evidence. And there are multiple places where that can go wrong. So the absence of the evidence is not as remarkable as the presence of the evidence.
What training and experience do you have with regard to DNA evidence? Your answer, not very much. Does that still stand today?
Correct. I've had lectures, but,
The absence of the evidence isn't as important as the presence of the evidence. But she discounts all the other evidence that points to a motor vehicle. The DNA of John O'Keefe on the bumper, the hair, the taillight pieces in his shirt, Karen Reed's statements, the car data, all that, the presence of all that other evidence doesn't matter whatsoever. Now we're getting into the nonsensical, irrational thinking of the innocence fraudsters like Marie Russell. Only thing that matters is the way I see it. I will negate all the other evidence in front of me because I want it to be so, or for whatever reason.
I'm not a DNA person.
Not very much, right? And so now you're suggesting, without any fact, that many things could have gone wrong.
Absolutely, with any specimen.
Right, so you're willing to come into court and just float an idea without a good faith basis or fact?
Objection, Your Honor.
Assistant.
What went wrong in the collection of this DNA? What went wrong in it?
I can't tell you what went wrong, but I can tell you that there were possibilities that there were errors at various steps.
Okay, well, if you want to...
She said at last hearing she didn't know much about DNA. Now she's an expert in collection.
Claim and allege an error to demean or discount the evidence. Tell us what the error was that happened with the production, the preservation and testing of this DNA. What was it?
I can't tell you the exact error, but there's, first of all, the deceit of some of the evidence.
What evidence do you have that it washed off?
I don't have any proof, but you asked me possibilities.
No, I didn't ask you possibility. You're raising possibilities. I'm asking you what evidence, what fact do you have that DNA was degraded or taken from that sweater because he was lying in the snow? What evidence do you have?
I don't have evidence. I'm considering different possibilities.
What about the preservation claim that somehow there was an irregularity or a taint? What evidence do you have that there was something about the accumulation of this evidence, this item, that was tainted?
I didn't say, or I didn't mean to say, that there was a definite error in the process. I'm telling you that there could be. So that's why a negative finding is not all that remarkable.
When we're in a court...
Right, Bigfoot could have licked it off of him. Could be. Could be. I'm just telling you why it's not remarkable, guys. Anyone seen the drones going around? Drone could have lifted it off of him.
You know, as an expert witness and as a doctor, you can't speculate. That's not a reasonable degree of medical certainty, is it?
I'm telling you, with a process, just like when blood is drawn from a patient, for instance.
This is coming from somebody who says they don't know very much about DNA. You're floating an idea that you have no factual basis for.
I'm talking about a specimen in general.
I'm not
it doesn't have to be DNA specimens. Specimens in general there can be errors in the process.
But we're talking about DNA here because you brought it up last hearing. You suggested that there was an irregularity at the last hearing.
There could be. You asked, for an explanation why DNA was not found. Well, that's a possibility.
So when
did everybody see Alessi slumped in his chair, looking so defeated? I don't think they're going to go the dog route. I mean, if they do, maybe they will. Maybe they'll continue on. They never stop, these people. They never admit defeat. So
you're using words like something could have gone wrong. You're not suggesting in good faith, and in fact, that you believe something went wrong, are you?
Objection, Your Honor.
No, I'm going to allow it.
This is the edited version. I took so much out of this, and we're still not getting through it. So where are we? We're 45 minutes in. Okay, I'm going to stop for today. We've been going for an hour and 40 minutes. I don't want to be self-indulgent. I think that's we can return to Dr. Russell. There's amazing things when she finds out that the federal investigators ruled out a dog. That's coming up. Also, Hank Brennan's amazing final argument to the judge is something to really take our time and look at tomorrow. Also, there's been an objection by, I haven't read it fully yet, by Gretchen Voss. So she's put in a filing. I have to read it. So I'm sure she's objecting to turning over stuff again. Just turn it over, Gretchen Voss. Enough of this. Enough. I would think you would want to turn it over to see Karen Reed convicted, but okay. I think her notes are going to be, if her notes get thrown out for some reason, I would care the least. The most interesting thing is, to my eye, is the unedited interviews with Gretchen Voss and Karen Reed, and what her lawyers told her, how they interjected into her interview with Gretchen Voss. So all that we're going to talk about tomorrow. I will see you tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern on the dot. Have a great night, everybody. Going to go out with my hits and go. I hit my boyfriend with my car about Karen Reed. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks for listening and watching with me.
I hit my boyfriend with my car. It wasn't an accident, but with lying lawyers I'll go far. Lying lawyers and witness harassment, I'll avoid prison. It was snowing. I pushed the pedal down, hit him hard. Now the legal system a clown. Innocence fraud campaign to save my skin. Making money, truth is my second victim. Carry, Jen, like John, you were my mom. My innocence fraud campaign is my biggest hit yet. I hit my boyfriend with my car. It wasn't an accident, but with lying lawyers I'll go far. Lying lawyers and witness harassment, I'll avoid prison. It was snowing. I pushed the pedal down, hit him hard. Now the legal system, my clown.